So you're thinking of moving to Utah? Well, then this channel's for you. We cover everything what it's like to live and work and play in the state of Utah. On this particular video, we'll be talking about St. George, Utah, which is in southern Utah. I'll be talking about 5 pros and at least 5 cons of what it's like to live in St. George, Utah. And of course, as usual, at the end, if you stay and listen to the end, I'll give you a bunch of bonus pros of why it's so great to live in St. George, Utah. So with that, let's talk about St. George. So welcome to living in Provo, Utah. I'm Scott Walters with Best USA Realty. Appreciate you finding my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Of course, click onto that notification bell so that you get notified every time that we drop a new video. And I'm making videos weekly about what it's like to live in Provo, Utah and the surrounding areas. So that generally includes American Fork to the north, Linden in the middle, and Santaquin to the south, and all the cities in between. But on this particular video, we're going a little bit further south of Provo. We're going all the way down to St. George, which is about 3.5 hours from Provo. You may ask yourself, well, why are we going all the way down to Provo, or down to St. George? And the reason is, St. George is like the playground for northern Utah. A lot of people like to escape and get away down to St. George, as well as buy vacation rentals or vacation there, or have second homes in that area. So there's a lot of people that are moving that way. My family personally comes from that area. My grandfather grew up there in the early 1900s. I've had aunts and uncles that live there. I have an aunt and uncle that live in that St. George area currently. So, and we just recently got back from a weekend vacation to St. George. So with that, we thought we'd talk about why it's so great to live in the St. George area. I'm going to give you 5 pros and 5 cons, and I'll give you some bonus pros at the end of the video. So with that, let's talk about the pros and cons of St. George. So when talking about pros of living in St. George, one cannot get away without talking about the scenery. St. George has some beautiful scenery. It certainly starts with the beautiful red rock formations that are all around the city, and of course head on out towards the Zion National Park, where there's even more stunning red rocks. But right around the city, there's a city park that's just right on the north end of St. George that has beautiful rock formations. Super fun for the kids to go walk in and play in. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Lots of beautiful bluffs. And then, of course, you've got Snow Canyon and Tuacahn, which are just right there in the St. George area, which have some spectacular red rock formations. The canyon going up Tuacahn has some of the very unique red rock formations, kind of a narrow valley that's really cool. And then you've got Snow Canyon, which is just to the east of Tuacahn Valley, and that has some spectacular formations, as well as has some petrified sand dunes, lots of hiking area trails. So just the scenery is just stunning and breathtaking. It's very unique. And then again, you also have the Pine Valley Mountains that just overlook all of St. George, and you can get up into the mountains and get into, they've got reservoirs up there, and you've got pines and just some beautiful high mountain scenery right super close to St. George. So when you're talking about St. George, one of the pros has to be the scenery. Okay, so my first con with living in St. George is a little bit unique, as I mentioned earlier in one of the things about how St. George is close to Las Vegas and also to LA, but in a way it's also still quite remote. So it's a little bit away from the major population centers of Utah. So it's 3.5 hours to Provo and 4.5 hours to Salt Lake. It's kind of isolated. It's kind of on an island down there by itself in the southwest corner of Utah. Fortunately, it's become a rather large area. I said earlier, it's also, that whole county has about 172,000 people in it. So it's become big enough that it now has a lot of the services that you can enjoy. You don't really have to go to the big cities anymore to do any of the shopping or things of that nature. It's self-contained. But yeah, it is a little bit remote. Like I said, it's about an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes to Las Vegas, and 4.5 to 5 hours to the LA area. So yeah, it's kind of on an island. Another pro with St. George is the weather. It is just, my wife was just commenting to me about how it's always so clear down there. The skies are so clear. Doesn't feel like there's hardly any pollution there. They certainly do not deal with the winter inversions that we get up here in northern Utah, and so the weather is just spectacular. I mean, almost 365 days of the year, you're going to have some sunshine at some point in the day. And so the weather's really great. The weather's super fantastic from, I'd say, probably late September through April. That's probably the best time of the year. The weather's really nice. And in the wintertime, it's just like perfect. You're able to walk outside in shirt sleeves and shorts and just enjoy a beautiful day. I mean, Christmas Day, you'll be outside. It'll be 60 degrees for a high during the middle of the day. So the weather is fantastic there for 7, 8, 9 months of the year. It's a beautiful place to be. My next con has to do with the weather. So I mentioned in one of my pros was the weather, because the weather's, you've got sunshine 365 days of the year. But those summer months can be very, very hot in St. George. You just need to be aware that that's what you're dealing with. You'll have temperatures that are in the high 110, 108, 109, 110, sometimes even hotter than that. So it can be extremely hot in the summertime. It's definitely a little bit drier heat, so it's not going to be like the heat that you're going to experience if you're in some place like Orlando. It's going to be more similar to what you're going to experience in the heat like in Las Vegas or in Phoenix. That's the type of heat that I can relate it to. So just know that basically from May to September, you're going to have some really, really hot temperatures to deal with. Another pro to living in St. George has to be parks. Now I'm talking about city parks, state parks, and national parks. So let me tackle some of the city parks first. There's like over 20 city parks in St. George. My family's personal favorite is one that's called Pioneer Park, and that's the one I mentioned a little bit earlier. It just sits right to the north of St. George, nestled among very unique red rocks. Lots of tiny little caves. My kids love climbing inside of there and just begging for mom and dad to take pictures of them as they're sitting in these really cool rock formations. And then they have this nice overlook that you can climb up to, and they did build a little bridge across some of the rocks, and you can get on top of that big red, I believe they call it the Dixie Rock, and it overlooks the entire valley of St. George. And you're looking down in, of course, you can see the iconic St. George Temple down in the valley and all the other buildings, and just you can see a long ways. And so it's a really, really cool park. But they also have an all abilities park, and like I say, 18 other parks besides that, 18 other city parks. So there's just all kinds of great family recreation or personal recreation places that you can go and enjoy the outdoors right in the city. Now, state parks, there's a whole bunch of state parks right around the St. George area. I'm going to mention some of the more popular ones. You have the Gunlock Reservoir, which is to the northwest of St. George, and that's a place that people like to go and enjoy a nice large reservoir for boating, fishing, camping, things of that nature. And then, of course, the other two that are just over by the city of Hurricane, which is to the northeast of St. George, would be Quail Creek and Sand Hollow. Sand Hollow is very unique because it's got a lot of red sandy beaches that surround that lake. And it's a very large reservoir. It's perfect for boating, for tubing, for wakeboarding. My family just spent the weekend down there. Everyone had a great time jumping in the water. The water is very pleasant this time of year. It's not one of those where you jump in, it takes your breath away. It's like perfect water this time of year. So it's a great reservoir to go to. And then just a few miles away from that is Quail Creek, which is also a really beautiful reservoir. The shores seem to be a little more rocky, not quite the red sand, which is good and bad, I guess good. The sand at Sand Hollow can be extremely hot, so make sure that you wear some good footwear to protect your feet as you're walking on that sand. And then they've got both of those state parks have rentals where you can rent jet skis and go have some fun on the lake. So those are two really cool state parks very nearby. There's also Snow Canyon State Park. I mentioned that just a little bit earlier, and that is also a great park. Beautiful rock formations you can go check out up there. The day that I went up there last week was pretty cool. You had some guys that were paragliding up through Tuacahn Valley and then coming back down through Snow Canyon. Is quite a unique sight to see that. But there were people hiking all over the place, hiking on the petrified sand dunes, hiking on all the different trails. There were multiple places, trailheads that you could stop and take some beautiful hikes in that park. So that's just right next to St. George. So there you go. There's some of the state parks that are nearby. And then When it comes to national parks, well, St. George is a great place to hang out if you want to go visit a lot of the beautiful national parks. Of course, you have Zion's National Park, which is probably the most popular national park in the state of Utah for people to visit. And it's probably 45 minutes from St. George. It's not too far. So St. George is a great base to be if you want to go visit that. Go check out the Emerald Pools or Angel's Landing, or just a whole host of the beautiful sites that you can have at Zion Canyon. Or you can go up I-15 to the Kolob arm of Zion Canyon. That's a short drive, maybe 15-20 minutes, and just some outstanding rock scenery up that canyon as well. So anyway, you've got Zion National Park, but then again, you're also only just, I would say, maybe 2 hours from Bryce Canyon from St. George. So it's a pretty close place to go check out Bryce Canyon, which has its really spectacular hoodoos and, you know, red rocks there as well. And it's also close to Cedar Breaks. That's probably an hour away from St. George. That's a national monument. It's kind of like a mini Bryce Canyon. That's a really cool place. And then if you want to take a little longer trip, you can probably take about 2.5-3 hour drive, and you're at the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So when it comes to parks, St. George is a fantastic location because you're close to beautiful state parks, city parks, and national parks. So the next con is traffic. You know, I was mentioning how St. George has 87,000 people. I think when I was a kid, it had more like about 15 or 20,000 people. So it's really grown a lot over the years. And with that growth comes a lot of traffic. There's two major roads that go through the St. George city itself. That's St. George Boulevard and Bluff Street. Those streets are pretty busy most of the time. If you're going early in the morning, they're not bad at all. But you get there during rush hour time, those streets are going to be very, very busy. You've also got all the roads that are over by the mall. That's Telegraph Street, and I think that turns into Red Cliffs Drive. That can be very, very busy. There's an intersection to I-15 right there off of Red Cliffs Drive. I forget the name of it. I think it's called Green Canyon, something like that. That place can get super backed up because it's so, that main road that diverts you to either north or south is so close to I-15 that with all the traffic getting off I-15, there's just not enough room for it. It all gets backed up at the lights right there. So that can be an extremely busy intersection. So that's just one of the deals. Again, if you're coming from some other place like California, you're going to laugh at traffic. You're going to say this is nothing. But it has become busier than what a lot of locals are used to or like. So anyway, there's your con number 3, traffic. So my next pro is something a lot of people probably don't even think about when they're thinking of St. George or even know about, but St. George is a fantastic biking city. They have over 60 miles of paved biking trails and hiking and running trails if that's what you want to use them for. As I was driving around there last weekend, they were just all over the whole valley, connecting the valley. And it made me want to bring my bike down there and go for a ride. There are just so many trails all over the place. And then again, they also have lots and lots of mountain biking slash dirt trails all throughout and near the city. So, and again, with the weather in St. George, you can literally bike 365 days of the year. The weather's good enough that you can get out and enjoy those trails all throughout the year. And I know that they plan on continuing to increase that trail system and make it even bigger, and even make it a source of ability to commute to work, so you're not just relying on cars or bus transportation. So there's lots of plans for enhancements on those trails. Anyway, so one of the great benefits of St. George, all the wonderful bike trails. The next con is walkability, and this is really pretty true for a lot of the cities in Utah. They're not really that walkable. They're very spread out. The way that they were laid out originally, all the homes are very spread out. There's not a lot of high-rise type living in Utah. There's a lot of single-family homes, starting to be a lot more townhomes around, but still a lot of spread out homes. So that causes the walkability to be able to walk to the grocery store or to shopping. It's just a little bit tougher. You're probably going to want to drive a car or take public transportation. There is a bus system, Suntran, for St. George you can use to take to places, and I'll include a link in the description for them. I think their fare is like $30 for a monthly pass, so it's really pretty cheap to use that. But I mean, if you're wanting to drive out to Costco, if you're wanting to drive anywhere else or go any place like that to shop, you're going to want to drive because it's just too far to walk. So that's my con number 4. It's not a super walkable city, but it is beautiful. Well, one of the great things about St. George too is all the shopping. So this is my pro number 5. St. George has really grown up, become a pretty big city. It's a city of 87,000 people now. And of course, Washington County, the county that St. George resides in, holds 172,000 people. So with that kind of population, it brings in a lot of commercial activities and a lot of shopping, dining opportunities that didn't used to be in that area. So, I mean, you've got pretty much every shop that you can think of. You've got your Costco's, you've got all the different grocery stores you can think of, all the different restaurants you can think of. There's just tons and tons of nice restaurants in and around St. George area. And so that definitely, to me, is one of the pros of living in St. George. You've just got a plethora of shopping opportunities. My last con has to be it can be very touristy. So it can get very busy during certain touristy times of the year. Most everybody from northern Utah goes to St. George for spring break. It's almost impossible to find a vacant hotel room during spring break. And then also they have, because of the great weather, they have lots of baseball and soccer tournaments throughout multiple times of the year in St. George. The biggest one is in February. It's called the Icebreaker. We remember taking our daughter there for a soccer tournament, and it's usually just the end of February, and it goes over 3 or 4 days. And I remember just driving during that time. There were just so many cars, so much traffic. Everywhere's just busy and filled up. And so I'm sure the locals don't love all the tourists, but it's definitely kind of a touristy place. And then again, you get tourists that come in that are going up to visit Zion National Park. So sometimes it can feel quite busy just because of all the out-of-town people and the tourists that are visiting St. George. So I promised you some bonus pros about living in St. George, and I've got quite a few because St. George is a pretty cool place and pretty unique place to live. If you like to golf, then St. George is the place for you. There are a ton of golf courses in and around that area, and they're stunning as you have this beautiful green grass right up next to the red rocks and the red scenery. So it's pretty darn unique, pretty cool. There's a lot of beautiful golf course communities. So if you're interested in finding a golf course community to live in, then reach out to me. I'd love to get you in touch with some of those communities, some of those properties, and help you find a beautiful golf course home to enjoy. One of my favorite golf courses, the one I went and got some pictures of, is the Sand Hollow Resort Golf Club. It's right out there by that Sand Hollow Resort, so I guess technically that's in the Hurricane area. That is quite a unique golf course. Again, beautiful green grass right up against the red rocks overlooking the Sand Hollow Reservoir. You also have the Copper Rock Golf Course, the Sky Mountain Golf Course. Coral Canyon Golf Club is another beautiful golf course. You have the Ledges Golf Club. You have Entrada at Snow Canyon. You have Green Spring Golf Course, the Sunbrook Golf Club, the Southgate Golf Club. You have the Sun River Golf Course. You've got the Red Hills Golf Course. That's a 9-hole course. And then you have the St. George Golf Course, or St. George Golf Club. And then, of course, if you want to just go a little bit out of town, about 35 minutes from St. George, is a really cool golf course in Mesquite, Nevada. That's rated one of the top 5 golf courses in the state of Nevada, and that's only 35 minutes from St. George. So that is definitely a bonus pro to living in St. George. Lots of beautiful golfing opportunities in that area. So another bonus pro to St. George are all the cool buildings. So of course, probably the most iconic old building that you see in St. George as you come into that valley is the white St. George Temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That was erected and built in the late 1800s, and so that very much dominates the skyline of St. George City. It's a very unique and beautiful building. Currently, it's under a renovation, being updated, and anyway, a lot of fun. So in the downtown part of St. George, they have some other really cool and unique buildings in the old downtown district. But one of them that I noticed the other day when I was there was the St. George Tabernacle. Really beautiful and unique old building. That's also a building of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then, of course, back they also have Brigham Young home, Brigham Young's winter home. So Brigham Young was the prophet for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the mid 1850s or 1847. He was the one that led the Mormon pioneers across the plains as they were kicked out of Nauvoo, and in the wintertime, and they fled to the west to try to find some refuge. And he's the one that led them all the way to Salt Lake Valley. About the time that as soon as they got to Salt Lake Valley, he started sending small groups to basically colonize all of the west. And St. George is one of those towns that he sent people down to make a settlement. He sent them all over throughout the Mountain West, all up and down the Wasatch Range, throughout Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, to form a bunch of settlements. And so he had a winter home in St. George because that was a very temperate climate, and he'd go there in the wintertime. So that historic house is right there in St. George. So another bonus pro that a lot of people may not think about is the fact that St. George is pretty darn close to Las Vegas. It's about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 minutes to the Las Vegas area. So if that's the thing that you enjoy doing, if you like going down and seeing the shows or going to the casinos or taking in what that big city has to offer, you're not that far away. The other cool thing is it's also pretty darn close to Southern California. You're only about 5 hours away to the Los Angeles area. So that means you're just a few hours to go check out Disneyland, go to the beaches, add another hour and a half on there, and you're on down to San Diego and SeaWorld and just all those areas that you can check out and have fun at. So definitely a bonus pro to St. George is it's not too far away from some of those big cities that you can go vacation in. Now, my last bonus pro is the healthcare system in St. George, more specifically the hospital system. So this one is a personal thing for me. Probably, I think it's been 15 years ago. I was at my brother's home in Las Vegas, and during the middle, my dad and I were both there. We're going to some real estate classes at the Las Vegas Board of Realtors. And then on that night after our first day of classes, we were at my brother's house, and during the night, probably around midnight or so, my dad woke my brother and me up and said, "Hey, I'm having a heart attack." Now, he'd had several before, so he knew what he was having. So my brother and I gave him a blessing, and we all got the inspiration that we needed to get him to St. George and not to a hospital in Las Vegas. So I loaded him up in the middle of the night and headed the hour and a half up to St. George. Probably made it in about 45 minutes because, I was speeding. Got him to that hospital, and they literally saved his life. One of the best surgeons in the world for heart surgery was in that hospital. They ended up performing a 5 bypass, heart bypass surgery. Gave him another 12, 14 years of life because of that surgery. And so some of the best surgeons, heart surgeons in the world are in that St. George area at that hospital. So I'm going to say my bonus pro number 5 is a great healthcare system and a wonderful hospital. Thanks for watching this video about the pros and cons of living in beautiful St. George, Utah. Now don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, as well as click on that notification bell so that you get notified every time that I drop a new video about what it's like living in Utah. Specifically, I focus on the Provo area, but today's video has been all about St. George. If you have any questions about what it's like to live in St. George, then reach out to me. I'll leave my phone number and my email in the description so you can reach out to me. I'd love to visit with you and help you learn and know more about the beautiful city of St. George, Utah.